DevOps is dead, gone, no more. Or at least that's what I've been hearing lately. It's a relatively common sentence now. I'm not sure whether that's really true or that's a marketing stunt from certain vendors. So let's try to answer the question, is DevOps dead? And if it is, and knowing that nothing dies in our industry without being replaced by something else, the question is what that something is. So, is DevOps dead? And if it is, what is the new thing? To answer the question whether DevOps is indeed dead, we might need first to define what DevOps is, because if we don't know what it is, how can we know whether it is alive or it is dead? Nevertheless, to define what DevOps is, we might need to define a few other roles that might or might not be made obsolete by DevOps and then obsolete by whatever is coming after, and so on and so forth. So let's see how it all played out. How did we get to have DevOps, and what comes afterwards, or does anything come afterwards, and so on and so forth. Let's pause for a second because I need to tell you about Akiro. It helps teams design and deliver secure cloud infrastructure from day zero. It has a drawing canvas that allows you to drag and drop infrastructure pieces and connect them together. It contains a rather extensive component library that you can use when designing your infrastructure. It enables collaboration between different members of your team. It allows you to import your Terraform or CloudFormation manifests, and it contains quite a few other interesting features. On top of all that, Akiro is the sponsor of this video, so please go and check them out. By doing that, you're helping this channel a lot. So please go and check out Akiro. The link is in the description. So, long time ago, we had application developers. And bear in mind that I'm saying intentionally application developers, but I'm going to get to that later and explain why I'm not saying simply developers. Anyways, we had application developers who knew how to write code of their applications. And then when the time comes, they would ask somebody else, hey, can you build this for me? Build it. You over there, build my application. And then app developers would go to testing experts and say, and now you, bunch of you, test my application for me. And then they would go to people who understood how to manage systems and say, hey, I need a cluster. And then they would go to ops people or whatever they would be called and say, I need it deployed. And then they would go to yet another group of experts and say, and now that it is running in production, I need you to monitor my application. So the job of application developers was to send their stuff, throw it over the wall to one group of experts or another group of experts, right? The only exception were security people, security experts. Nobody was throwing anything to them, but they would come and say, nope, you cannot go with that because it's not secure. There are those 5,735 vulnerabilities that you need to fix. And that was highly inefficient. It took half a year to promote a release from idea to production, because every time you throw it over the wall, you need to wait, and then it gets thrown back to you, and then you throw it to somebody else, and you repeat the process because testers found bugs, and so on and so forth. It was horrible. But then came the magic Agile coach and say, guys, this is not good. Don't do this. You need to work together. Together, you're going to be better. And that meant that testers were moved into the teams of application developers so that a single team can both develop the code, write the code, and test it. Developers did not like that because they were saying, hey, no, I don't want to test. I do not want those guys with me or girls with me. No, this is a horrible idea. But eventually, after a lot of sweat and tears, we accepted as industry that development, writing code of application and writing code of tests or testing is not that dissimilar, and that it should be joined together, and we should work in fast iterations, and so on and so forth. So we won that battle. So testing and development tasks were put and delegated to people working in the same team. On top of them, they got agile coaches and product owners, product owners, and so on and so forth. We got agile teams, right? Now, a while later, Docker came around and says, hey, but you can build it yourself. And the reaction was similar to the one we had with testing. Application developers and testers, working in the same team were saying, no, that's not my thing. I do not want to build stuff. Forget about that Docker thing. We have people who do building. We should not do that. But eventually Docker won, and Docker was adopted, our containers to be more specific, by most of the teams today, and nobody thinks about delegating building container images to somebody else. So that also shifted left. And at that moment, we had, generally speaking, two types of tasks that were done by separate teams in the past, but are now moved into application development teams, and that's testing and building. The important part of this story is that shifting left, testing and building was painful and was met with rejection for a while, until everybody accepted it and said, hey, this is actually better. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said that that's a silly idea. It's a good idea. Or to put it in other words, teams tried to incorporate testing and building into those teams, and they often failed. And we were hearing news like, Agile is dead. We're going back to waterfall. No more Agile. Agile is dead. But then we tried again and again and again, and eventually succeeded, because it takes time until we change the way we work. So working in Agile teams was fantastic, because we all thought that we can finally iterate faster because we are self-sufficient. We have all the skills to develop the application, test the application, build the application, do everything else we need with that application. It was a years-long party. We were celebrating and everybody was happy. Are you Agile? No. Oh, you should be. Are you Agile? Yes. Oh, great to meet you. Yeah, I'm Agile as well. Those were the conversations, more or less. So self-sufficiency was the main benefit of Agile teams. But at one moment, some other people, people who were not invited into that Agile party said, self-sufficient, really? And how about clusters? Are you managing your own clusters? Do you know what a cluster is? How about deployments? Who is doing deployments for you? And security? And so on and so forth? Who is doing all those things? You're not self-sufficient. You just know how to write code, you know how to test it, and then you say, I'm doing fast iterations. I'm having releases every week, but that's not true, because you do not know what's happening after that, and you still need to wait for us to do the work for you. So the result of all those questions like, hey, what about clusters, deployment, security, and so on and so forth was, well, I don't know. You do it. You were always doing it, but I am self-sufficient. It did not really work well. It was an improvement, but not sufficient. So with Agile, generally speaking, we got two types of teams. Agile teams, application developers that knew how to do part of the life cycle of an application, the left part, the early part, and we have everybody else. I will call everybody else ops, even though that's not a good name, because we have different types of expertise over there. But all those teams that were, or people that were not really writing code of end user applications. And then came DevOps guru to those organizations and said, we are going to do DevOps. Well, how are we going to do DevOps? Well, easy. Application developers from now on should do everything. From the idea until it is running in production shall be done. You will do it. Who's you? Application developers. And application developers after a while ask the logical question like, how do you expect me to do it? How do you expect me to have 5 years of experience in AWS and 4 years of experience in Kubernetes and 3 years of experience in Service Mesh and 17 years of experience in security? Nope. It's not going to happen. We cannot have such high expectations. We cannot expect everybody to be expert in everything. That is not going to happen. So that idea, you do everything, failed. miserably, just as in my opinion, being full stack developer failed for everything except very small systems or very small teams. In some other cases, that DevOps guru said something else, said, hey, you, everybody else, ops, I'm going to call you ops, you're going to become DevOps. So you're going to do something called DevOps. And the reaction from ops people, from everybody else was, hey, does that mean more money? Do I get higher salary? Well, more often than not, yes. What else does that mean? Is it just that I change my title, job title, from security something or ops or sysadmin to DevOps? And most of the time the answer was yes. So ops people, I'm generalizing it now, became DevOps, continued doing the same thing, just with slightly higher salaries and a different job title. Everybody's DevOps now. That did not work either, because that's not a change in anything except the title. So the DevOps guru eventually came and said, you know what? DevOps is dead. This does not work. Dead. Application developer said, yes, I could never do it anyway, so of course it's dead. And ops people said this wasn't a real change. So yeah, I agree, DevOps is dead. But I keep the increase in salary, right? Because now I'm called DevOps. Now, since you cannot really get more money by changing the title without convincing everybody that you're doing something else, and if DevOps is dead, we came up with a brilliant new idea and say, hey, whomever was called DevOps is now called platform engineer. DevOps is dead. Platform engineering is the new big shiny thing. Now, as you can guess, renaming titles, changing titles without changing anything else does not really work. So the death of DevOps and rise of platform engineering was not really a real thing, at least not within the context of many organizations. We did not adopt DevOps as we should, and then it failed. And then it was replaced with the same thing that we call now platform engineering, but it's not really the same thing, except that people implement it in the same way. So let's scratch all that. Let's think about what we should have done and how DevOps should look like. To begin with, we have development teams. There are no other teams. That doesn't exist. Everybody is a member of one development team or another, because everybody is an engineer, everybody develops something, or at least each team develops something. Now within that team, not everybody necessarily has to write code, even though everybody should write code. Anyway, we should have quite a few development teams. Now what those teams develop, that's where really things start to change. Some teams, as always, are in charge of developing end-user applications. Those are your websites and backends and frontends and whatever your end users are consuming. And then we have development teams that could be, for example, developing services related to security. This is how you adopt security in your applications. This is how you make them safe. This is how you make them secure. So instead of me giving you Excel sheets with all the vulnerabilities, I'm giving you tools, services that you can consume to make your work safe, or the outcomes of your work safe. We could have development teams in charge of developing solutions to manage infrastructure. Some call it infrastructure as code, I call it control planes. It can have many names. What matters is that teams could be in charge of developing services to manage infrastructure. Other teams might be developing and managing automation services. The point is that all the teams develop solutions from beginning to the end, from having the idea until it is running in production. For some teams, production means end user application running in production. For other teams, production might mean internal services consumed by other teams. But everybody develops some sort of services, and everybody is fully in charge of those services from beginning to the end. There are no teams that will do the work for you, but there are teams that are going to create services that you can consume to make your work easier. And that is the spirit of DevOps. Each of those development teams is fully in charge of the life cycle of their applications or services from beginning to the end. We figure out what we need to do, we do it, we deploy it to production, we manage it in production, we observe it in production. It's all about self-sufficient teams that have both development and operational expertise baked in to those teams. Now, as I said before, we cannot expect everybody to know everything, and that's why it is important we have teams, again, DevOps teams or teams that are fully in charge of life cycle of something that is focused on internal usage. Hey, you do not have to learn everything there is to learn about Kubernetes because I'm going to provide to you Kubernetes as a service. And the same thing goes for security, the same thing goes for automation. So you will still do all those things yourself, but by consuming our services instead of doing it over and over again by yourself and trying to figure it out from scratch and so on and so forth. And that's where platform engineering comes in. One of those teams can be in charge of creating an internal developer platform that unites all those internal services, puts a layer on top of those services, and enables all the teams to consume everybody else's work, everybody else's services, so that their jobs are easier. And the way how platform engineering works is by treating all other teams as customers. You go and try to figure out what your customers need. Hey, what do you need? And the answer could be, I need to have a simpler way to define and manage my applications. And then you might discover that there are other teams that need the same thing. And if many need the same thing, then that's a good candidate to develop and integrate into your internal developer platforms. Some other teams might say, hey, I need something else like XYZ, and I'm the only one who needs it. And in that case, that shouldn't be part of the platform because that team can develop it by itself. It's not that every team except platform engineering teams to develop everything for them, but platform engineering teams are trying to figure out how they can serve wide audience within the company. If many teams need something, that's a good candidate to be part of the platform. And if something is needed only by a single team or two teams, then those teams can do it themselves. So all in all, we have internal developer platform. Everybody consumes that or can consume services through that platform. That platform makes it easier to consume the services because the way how certain type of experts manage something does not mean that that's the best way or easiest way to manage that something by everybody else. And everybody contributes to that internal developer platform as well, except that we have a platform owner, right? So platform engineering team owns the platform, but does not necessarily have to be the only contributor to that platform, because if you're an expert in security and you want to actually provide that as a service, you can plug it into the platform yourself, or you can go to platform engineering team as well. So, is DevOps dead? Well, maybe it will die one day, but it is definitely not replaced by platform engineering, because platform engineering and DevOps are two very, very, very different things. Even though many companies implemented DevOps thinking that they are doing platform engineering, and then they say DevOps is dead because we never understood what it really is. So DevOps is about being in full control of a life cycle of some application or some service. And to do that, you need, among other things, development and operational knowledge and experience up to a certain level. Now, since not everybody can know everything, we cannot expect that people spend 57 years becoming experts in everything that is related to ops or to dev. We have platform engineers that are facilitating that independence, right? Because platforms, internal developer platforms, are a set of services that are easy to consume and do the operations or tasks required by other teams, with the goal for those other teams to be self-sufficient. So DevOps is a cultural change, it's how we organize ourselves, and platform engineering is about creating and putting together internal services that facilitate the work of others. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Cheers.